Turns out, your favorite supervillain isn't as evil as you think. We ranked both Marvel's and DC's darkest characters across Dr. Michael Stone's 22 levels of evil, a spectrum of psychological evil, from those who kill only in self-defense to extreme torturers and psychopathic killers. Here, we don't care about power levels or popularity, we only care about crazy. And spoiler alert, Joker didn't even make the top 5. Level 1. We begin with the villains who have killed but only out of necessity, and never because they wanted to. Take Namor from Marvel for example. As the ruler of Atlantis, Namor has killed to protect his kingdom, but it's never been about personal gain. He's fierce and violent, but when you're a king responsible for an entire undersea empire, sometimes survival demands it. Namor's dedication to Atlantis often leads to extreme measures, but when push comes to shove, his killings are motivated purely by the need to protect his people. Is Namor truly a villain, or just a ruler in a complex world where peace isn't always an option? Then we have Catwoman from DC. Selina Kyle may have flirted with the dark side, but her hands have rarely been stained by blood. As a thief, her main goal is to steal, not to kill. When she has taken a life, it's almost always been in self-defense. Her complex relationship with Batman has also helped to keep her from spiraling deeper into the criminal world. Ultimately, she's more of an anti-hero than a full-blown villain, but when pushed, she's proven she can do whatever it takes to survive. Level 2. Moving up a level, we enter the realm of villains whose actions are driven by intense emotion, particularly jealousy or passion. These are the characters who don't kill out of cold-blooded calculation, but because they've lost control in the heat of the moment. A perfect example of this is Mystique from Marvel. Known for her shape-shifting abilities, Mystique is a character whose emotional instability has led her to commit terrible crimes. Whether it's her complex relationship with her son Nightcrawler or her passionate loyalty to the mutant cause, Mystique's actions are driven by deep-seated emotions. She's not a calculated killer, but her jealousy, rage, and emotional volatility make her a dangerous force. In the DC universe, Harley Quinn is another classic case of crimes of passion. Her descent into villainy started with her obsessive love for the Joker. Harley's early crimes were more about pleasing her puddin' than pursuing power or control. While she's evolved into a more independent character, her early days were marked by acts of violence driven by passion rather than malice. Even now, Harley's unpredictable nature means her actions are often fueled by emotion, not cold calculation. Level 3. At level 3, we find villains who may not have masterminded the most horrific crimes, but have played critical roles as associates or partners to those who have. One such character is Nebula, the adopted daughter of Thanos. Throughout much of her early life, Nebula was complicit in some of the worst atrocities in the universe, often carrying out her adopted father's genocidal orders. While she later rebels against Thanos and finds redemption, her history as his partner in destruction is undeniable. Another classic associate of dangerous killers is Deadshot from DC. Known as one of the best marksmen in the world, Deadshot has worked for organizations like the Suicide Squad and has allied himself with some of the worst criminals in the DC universe. While he may be driven by financial gain rather than a desire for chaos, his willingness to take life at the drop of a hat makes him a highly dangerous associate for far deadlier villains. Level 4. Next, we come to characters who kill in self-defense, but only after they've largely provoked the conflict themselves. Magneto is the perfect example of this. He believes that mutants are superior to humans, and his actions are often preemptive strikes against a world that he believes will inevitably try to destroy his kind. While his motivations are understandable, especially given his tragic backstory as a Holocaust survivor, Magneto's actions often lead to violence that he provoked, even if he claims it was in self-defense. Sinestro, the former Green Lantern, also fits into this category. Once a hero, Sinestro fell from grace when he became obsessed with ruling through fear. His violent confrontations with the Green Lantern Corps are often framed as self-defense, but they're almost always provoked by his own need for control and power. His fall from hero to villain is one of DC's most tragic arcs, but his actions place him firmly on this level of the hierarchy. Level 5. In Level 5, we encounter characters whose deep psychological trauma has led them to kill even those they once considered family. Green Goblin, aka Norman Osborn, is one of Marvel's most infamous villains, but his evil stems from a deep-seated psychological breakdown. His relationship with his son Harry is one of the most tragic in Marvel history. Norman's descent into madness as the Green Goblin led him to kill, manipulate, and destroy those he once loved. His unstable mind makes him a terrifying villain, especially when his personal life becomes tangled in his evil schemes. Similarly, Two-Face, aka Harvey Dent in the DC universe, is a villain who was once a hero. As Gotham's district attorney, Harvey Dent was one of Batman's closest allies. But after his face was disfigured, the psychological trauma split his personality in two. His descent into madness led him to turn on those he once called friends, and now his inner turmoil has driven him to kill people he once trusted. Dent's duality is central to his character, making him one of Gotham's most tragic villains. Level 6. Level 6 brings us villains who act purely on impulse, driven by rage or instinct. Sabretooth or Victor Creed is a prime example. Known for his violent, animalistic nature, Sabretooth kills without hesitation or thought. His primal instincts often take over, leading him to commit brutal acts of violence simply because it's in his nature. He's not one to plan his attacks. He acts in the moment, letting his bloodlust guide him. Over in DC, we have Cheetah, or Barbara Ann Minerva, whose transformation into a predator is driven by jealousy and rage. Cheetah's violent confrontations with Wonder Woman often stem from her bitterness and envy. Like Sabretooth, Cheetah's actions are often driven by instinct and emotion, making her one of DC's most dangerous impulsive villains. Level 7. At level 7, we find villains whose overwhelming narcissism leads them to commit terrible acts, often indistinguishable from those with true psychotic tendencies. Mysterio, with his illusions and ego, is one of Spider-Man's most dangerous foes. His schemes are driven by a need to prove himself superior to Spider-Man, and his narcissistic delusions lead him to commit increasingly dangerous and deadly acts, all in the name of his own glory. Similarly, Riddler, aka Edward Nygma from DC, is driven by his obsession with proving his intellectual superiority over Batman. The Riddler's ego drives him to set elaborate traps and puzzles that often lead to the deaths of innocent bystanders. While his actions are motivated by his need for validation, the collateral damage of his schemes makes him a highly dangerous narcissist. Level 8. Villains at level 8 may not be psychopathic, but their actions are fueled by deep-seated rage. Venom, aka Eddie Brock, is one such character. His hatred for Spider-Man drives much of his violence, and his bond with the symbiote amplifies his anger. While Venom has moments of heroism, his violent outbursts are often fueled by the rage that both Eddie and the symbiote carry. Huntress, aka Helena Bertinelli from DC, is another character driven by rage. After witnessing her family's murder, Huntress embarked on a violent quest for revenge. Her actions are rooted in deep personal pain, and while she's not psychopathic, her repressed anger makes her a dangerous foe. Level 9. Next, we meet villains whose jealousy has driven them into psychopathic behavior. Typhoid Mary, a Marvel villain, is a walking contradiction of love and destruction. With multiple personalities ranging from the timid Mary to the vengeful Typhoid and the downright murderous Bloody Mary, her emotions often spiral into violence. Her training as an assassin, along with her jealousy and obsession with Daredevil, have led her to commit horrific acts, oscillating between affection and cold-blooded attempts to destroy him. Her unstable mental state and her lethal blend of seduction and violence makes her a chilling fit for this level. In DC, Poison Ivy, aka Pamela Isley, falls into this category due to her jealousy and obsession, particularly in her relationships. Ivy's possessiveness over Harley Quinn, mixed with her eco-terrorism, often leads her to commit violent acts with little regard for human life. Her ability to manipulate plants and people alike makes her a formidable foe, with jealousy at the root of much of her evil. Level 10. Now we move into villains who kill anyone who stands in their way, driven more by ego than psychopathy. Dr. Octopus, aka Otto Octavius, is a prime example of a villain whose quest for scientific achievement leads him to take drastic, often deadly measures. He may not take pleasure in the suffering of others, but he has no qualms about eliminating those who threaten his success. Over in DC, Lex Luthor is the epitome of egocentric villainy. Luthor's obsession with being the greatest mind on Earth drives him to kill anyone who poses a threat to his power, particularly his arch-nemesis Superman. While Luthor doesn't necessarily enjoy the act of killing, his willingness to do so in the pursuit of his goals makes him one of the most dangerous minds in the DC universe. Level 11. At level 11, we encounter villains who have fully embraced their psychopathic tendencies. Kingpin, aka Wilson Fisk, is one of Marvel's most ruthless criminals, ruling New York's underworld with an iron fist. His lack of remorse and willingness to kill anyone who opposes him is evidence of his psychopathic personality. For Fisk, life is a transaction, and he has no problem taking it when it suits his needs. Black Manta, Aquaman's nemesis, also falls into this category. His obsession with revenge drives him to kill without hesitation. And while his initial motivation was to avenge his father's death, his actions have since morphed into cold-blooded murder. Black Manta's disregard for life and focus on his own goals makes him one of the most dangerous villains in DC's pantheon. Level 12. As we move higher up the scale, we reach villains who are motivated by a lust for power and will kill when their plans are threatened. Red Skull, aka Johann Schmidt, is a perfect example of this. As a high-ranking Nazi and later a Hydra operative, Red Skull committed countless atrocities in his quest for world domination. His willingness to kill anyone who stands in his way, combined with his psychopathic personality, makes him one of Marvel's darkest villains. In DC, General Zod is driven by his desire to rebuild Krypton at any cost, whether it's on Krypton or Earth. Zod's attempts to enforce his vision of a new Kryptonian empire result in the deaths of countless beings. His power-hungry nature means that when he's cornered, he will stop at nothing, even mass genocide, to achieve his goals. Level 13. Next, we encounter villains whose rage often causes them to lose control entirely. Carnage, aka Cletus Cassidy, is perhaps one of the most terrifying characters in the Marvel Universe. Before bonding with the Carnage symbiote, Cassidy was already a psychopathic serial killer. But with the symbiote, his violent tendencies are amplified. His killing sprees are driven by rage, and he thrives on chaos and destruction. In DC, Bane is another character whose rage often gets the best of him. While he's known for his intelligence and strategic mind, Bane's obsession with breaking Batman often leads him to extreme violence. His vendetta against the Dark Knight has led to mass murder, particularly when he notoriously unleashed the inmates of Arkham Asylum. Bane's uncontrollable rage makes him a force to be reckoned with in the DC universe, and when that anger is directed towards Batman, it's especially dangerous. Level 14. At this level, we meet villains who are willing to conspire and manipulate in cold, calculated ways. But the motivation isn't necessarily psychopathy, it's their own self-interest. Loki from Marvel is a prime example. His schemes, whether aimed at taking over Asgard or Earth, are often rooted in jealousy over Thor and a deep-seated need for validation. While he doesn't always seek destruction for its own sake, Loki is more than willing to manipulate others and sacrifice lives to achieve his goals. His silver tongue and flair for mischief are iconic, making him one of the most memorable manipulators in Marvel. Vandal Savage of DC is an immortal villain who has spent thousands of years manipulating history, politics, and entire civilizations to further his own power. His ruthlessness and intelligence allow him to orchestrate vast conspiracies, often leading to death and destruction on a global scale. Savage's self-centeredness stems from his belief in his superiority due to his immortality, and his desire to control the world has led him to countless acts of betrayal and conspiracy, making him a perfect fit for this level. Level 15. Villains at level 15 are those who've crossed the line into full-blown psychopathy, committing multiple murders, often without remorse. Purple Man, aka Zebediah Killgrave from Marvel, is chillingly calm in his psychopathy. His mind control abilities allow him to manipulate people into killing or dying for him without lifting a finger. His lack of empathy, combined with his godlike power over others, makes him one of the most dangerous manipulators in the Marvel Universe. From the DC Universe, we have Deathstroke, aka Slade Wilson. As a mercenary and assassin, Deathstroke has killed hundreds, if not thousands of people. His killings are often cold and calculated, executed with military precision. While he may have some tragic elements to his backstory, his willingness to kill anyone for the right price puts him in the multi-homicidal category. Level 16. Here, we find villains who, while perhaps motivated by a larger goal, commit brutal acts of violence without any remorse. Thanos, the Mad Titan, wiped out half of all life in the universe with a snap of his fingers. But his massacres began long before that. Believing that balance in the universe can only be restored through extreme measures, Thanos has committed genocide across countless worlds. His cold, calculated plan to use the Infinity Stones to save the universe by wiping out half of its inhabitants shows a terrifying lack of empathy and regard for life. The Joker is easily DC's most iconic psychopath. He thrives on chaos and destruction, orchestrating large-scale attacks like gas bombs in Gotham or elaborate murders of innocents for no other reason than to prove a point. Unlike Thanos, who operates under a twisted sense of logic on a universe level, the Joker's only goal is to create as much havoc and suffering as possible, often with no clear end game beyond causing pain around him. Level 17. Villains in Level 17 have not only committed multiple murders, but have also incorporated sexually perverse elements into their crimes. Daken, the son of Wolverine, is one of the most disturbing villains in the Marvel Universe. His killings are often sexually charged, and he takes pleasure in exerting control over his victims. His unique mix of charm and violence, paired with his complex relationships, make him a sadistic figure whose motivations are as much about power as they are about pleasure. In DC, Professor Pig is infamous for his grotesque surgical experiments. Pig captures his victims, mutilates them, and turns them into Dollatrons, or living dolls that are stripped of their humanity. His obsession with control, beauty, and perfection has an underlying perverse tone, making him one of Gotham's most horrifying villains. Level 18. Villains at level 18 take pleasure in torture, often extending the suffering of their victims before killing them. In the Marvel Universe, Mephisto is the ultimate torturer. As a demonic entity, Mephisto traps souls in his hell-like realm, where he subjects them to eternal torment. He's not always directly responsible for murder, but his prolonged torture of those who make deals with them places him in this level of sadism. For DC, Darkseid is the ultimate embodiment of control and torture. His quest for the anti-life equation, a formula that can strip individuals of their free will, leads him to subject entire planets to unspeakable suffering. His complete disregard for life, coupled with his desire to break the will of every living being, makes him a terrifying figure of evil. Level 19. At level 19, we encounter villains whose crimes include large-scale terrorism and subjugation. Apocalypse from Marvel is one of the oldest and most powerful mutants, and his belief in the survival of the fittest drives him to commit acts of mass terrorism and genocide. Apocalypse's attempts to improve humanity through selective breeding and eugenics are some of the most horrifying acts of villainy in the Marvel Universe. In the DC Universe, Ra's al Ghul fits this level perfectly. As the leader of the League of Assassins, Ra's has committed mass murders in the name of environmentalism, believing that the destruction of human civilization is necessary to restore balance to the Earth. His extremist views and willingness to kill millions for his cause makes him a deeply dangerous terrorist. Level 20. At this level, we encounter villains who take sadistic pleasure in inflicting both mental and physical pain, torturing their victims before finally delivering a fatal blow. Their twisted sense of entertainment revolves around breaking their prey, making their deaths a gruesome spectacle. Arcade is one of Marvel's most demented villains, known for his creation of Murder World, an elaborate death trap designed like an amusement park where he tortures and kills his victims. Each trap is tailored to exploit the fears and weaknesses of his targets, and Arcade takes great joy in watching them struggle for their lives. He doesn't kill for power or revenge, but rather for the thrill, using his victims' suffering as his own twisted form of entertainment. His ability to mentally and physically torment his victims before delivering the final blow is what makes Arcade stand out as one of the most sadistic villains in the Marvel Universe. Victor Zsasz is one of Gotham's most feared serial killers, known for carving a tally mark into his skin for every life he takes. He doesn't kill for money or revenge. He kills because he enjoys it. His psychotic obsession with adding to his collection of murders, coupled with the physical and emotional torture he inflicts on his victims, makes him one of the most dangerous characters in the DC Universe. Zsasz thrives on the fear and pain of his victims, taking pleasure in every mark he carves into his skin as a testament to their suffering. Level 21. Villains at this level are more focused on inflicting pain and suffering than outright killing their victims. Their goal is to psychologically or physically break their targets, often leaving them alive to endure the trauma. The Hood, aka Parker Robbins, is a crime boss who uses torture to enforce control over his criminal empire. Rather than killing his enemies outright, the Hood prefers to break them through psychological and physical torment, ensuring their loyalty or silence through fear. His mystically enhanced abilities only make his torture methods more effective, allowing him to prolong the suffering of those who oppose him. While he may not always be directly responsible for their deaths, his ability to inflict pain to get what he wants makes him a formidable villain. Scarecrow, aka Jonathan Crane, Batman's iconic foe, is obsessed with fear and psychological torture. He uses his fear toxin to enforce his victims to confront their deepest nightmares, often driving them to the brink of insanity. Scarecrow's goal is not to kill, but to break his victims' minds, leaving them in a state of perpetual fear. His methods of torture are purely psychological, making him one of the most terrifying villains in Gotham, as his victims are left mentally shattered long after their encounter with him. His ability to induce such extreme psychological trauma without directly killing makes Scarecrow a perfect fit for level 21. Level 22. Now we reach the highest level of evil, reserved for villains who not only kill, but relish in extreme acts of torture and sadism. These are the characters who represent the darkest side of humanity, or in some cases, inhumanity, taking pleasure in the prolonged suffering and brutal deaths of their victims. Our most evil Marvel villain is Gore the God Butcher. He's driven by a deep-seated hatred of gods, born from personal tragedy and loss. His quest for vengeance leads him to slaughter gods across the universe in the most brutal and painful ways possible. Gore doesn't just kill, he makes his victims suffer in unimaginable ways, often torturing them to exact revenge for the injustices he believes the gods have inflicted on mortals. Gore's obsession with eradicating all gods is rooted in a desire to watch them suffer, making him one of Marvel's most dangerous and sadistic villains. His ability to kill gods and his relentless pursuit of vengeance places him firmly at level 22. Madcap is another twisted Marvel villain with the ability to cause extreme psychological torment through his reality-warping powers. Immortal and detached from any sense of morality, Madcap uses his abilities to inflict endless suffering on others, often driving them insane. His complete disregard for life and joy in spreading chaos makes him a uniquely terrifying figure. Madcap's immortality means he can never be stopped, allowing him to continue his psychotic games without consequence, making him one of Marvel's most sadistic and cruel villains, right next to Gore the God Butcher. In the DC universe, the Batman who laughs represents our most evil villain, the absolute worst of what Batman could become. After being infected with the Joker's toxin, this twisted version of Bruce Wayne becomes a sadistic killer who uses his brilliant mind to torture his victims in the most horrific ways imaginable. His plans are often designed to break his enemies mentally and physically, and his love for inflicting suffering mirrors the Joker's psychopathic tendencies. The combination of Batman's intellect and the Joker's madness makes the Batman who laughs one of the most dangerous and sadistic villains in the multiverse. Not to be counted out, Trigon, an interdimensional DC demon, thrives on the suffering and destruction of entire worlds. Trigon's power allows him to enslave and torture entire populations, feeding off their pain and misery. His sadistic tendencies are evident in his manipulation of his own children, particularly Raven, who he seeks to corrupt and control. Trigon's ability to cause mass suffering on a global scale, combined with his love for tormenting others, places him at the pinnacle of evil in the DC universe. If you made it this far, you clearly have impeccable taste. We can't wait to hear your thoughts.